The intersection at Foster Street fell silent for one terrible moment. 7-year-old Lily Thompson stood frozen, her threadbare backpack clutched against her chest like a shield. 3 older children surrounded her, their laughter cutting through the afternoon air. "What's wrong? Orphan girl gonna cry again," Kyle sneered, shoving her backward. Lily stumbled, the heel of her worn sneaker slipping off the curb into the street. A truck horn blared as it approached. That's when it happened. From the shadows of the abandoned gas station, a large dog erupted, fur-matted, ribs visible, a network of scars crisscrossing his body. The German shepherd launched himself between Lily and the bullies, his bark deep and ferocious despite his weakened state. As traffic screeched to a halt, the dog's amber eyes met Lily's. In that moment, 2 broken souls recognized something in each other that no one else could see. Neither knew it yet, but this chance encounter would change everything. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Pinewood Children's Home sat on the outskirts of Chicago's Riverdale district, a 3-story brick building that had seen better days. Inside these walls, 27 children lived under the care of Mrs. Eleanor Winters, a silver-haired woman with kind eyes and perpetually worried brow. At 68, she ran the understaffed facility with determination that outmatched its resources. For 6 months, Lily Thompson had occupied the small bed by the window in room 12. Unlike the other children who filled the hallways with chatter and occasional laughter, Lily moved through the home like a ghost. Her honey-blonde hair hung limply around a face that hadn't smiled since the January night when a jackknifed semi-truck on Route 41 took both her parents instantly. The doctors called it selective mutism brought on by trauma. The other children simply called her weird. Every morning, Lily would carefully fold the single photograph she owned her mother, father, and herself at Lake Michigan and tuck it into her pocket before heading to Westridge Elementary. The photo remained her talisman against forgetting their faces. 3 blocks from Pinewood lived Kyle Matthews, 12 years old with a mean streak that grew in direct proportion to the bruises his father left on him. His followers, Zach Turner and Jessica Wells, both 11, mimicked his cruelty with the desperate eagerness of children seeking approval. They'd made Lily their favorite target since she arrived. Meanwhile, the German shepherd that locals occasionally spotted digging through dumpsters behind Manny's diner had a history known to no one. The veterans at Chicago Animal Control had nicknamed him Shadow during his brief stay 6 months ago, before he'd escaped their facility by somehow forcing open a damaged kennel latch. The deep burn scars across his left flank and the cigarette marks dotting his muzzle told the story of human cruelty that had taught him to fear people long before he became a stray. Officer Sarah Mitchell patrolled Riverdale with special attention to Pinewood. At 34, her dedication to the children there seemed beyond professional obligation, though she rarely spoke about her reasons. She kept an eye out for the stray German shepherd, too, admiring from a distance how he'd survived the streets despite his injuries. Dr. James Cooper's veterinary clinic stood 2 miles from Pinewood. His specialty in rehabilitating abused animals had earned him the nickname St. James among rescue workers. Though the 50-year-old brushed off such praise with embarrassed humility, none of them knew how their lives would intertwine because of one chance encounter at Foster Street. Lily's mornings at Pinewood followed the same silent routine. She would rise before the other girls, slip into the bathroom to avoid their stares, and dress in whatever clean clothes Mrs. Winters had left folded on her trunk. Breakfast was spent at the far end of the long table, where she would carefully wrap half her toast in a napkin and pocket an apple when no one was looking. "Child, you need to eat more than that," Mrs. Winters would say, her wrinkled hand gently squeezing Lily's shoulder. Lily would only nod, her blue eyes downcast. The elderly woman would sigh and move on to manage the chaos of 26 other children starting their day. There simply wasn't time to coax words from a child who refused to speak. The staff at West Ridge Elementary had been briefed on Lily's condition. Post-traumatic selective mutism, the school counselor had explained to her second-grade teacher, Mrs. Blackwell. "Don't force her to speak. She'll communicate when she's ready." 6 months had passed with Lily completing her assignments on paper, raising her hand for bathroom breaks, and sitting alone at lunch. Her classmates had initially been curious about the new silent girl. But children's attention spans are short. Curiosity had given way to indifference, and in some cases, to casual cruelty. After school, when the other Pinewood children played in the yard or attended activities, Lily would slip away to Riverside Park, once a community centerpiece. Budget cuts had left it partially abandoned, with an overgrown section behind the playground that most people avoided. Here, Lily would carefully unwrap her saved food and leave it near a hollow beneath the old oak tree. Then she would sit on a fallen log and wait, the photograph of her family clutched in her small hands. It was during the 3rd week of September when she first spotted him, the German shepherd with the scarred face. He had emerged cautiously from the bushes, sniffing the air before approaching her offering. His amber eyes, vigilant and wary, had locked with hers for a brief moment before he'd snatched the food and disappeared. Lily hadn't moved or called out. She understood what it meant to want to be invisible, day after day. She returned with her saved portions. The dog began to appear more regularly, though he never came close enough for her to touch. Lily noticed how he favored his left hind leg, how the scars across his flank pulled tight when he moved quickly. She recognized his pain because it mirrored her own invisible but ever-present. Kyle Matthews and his friends discovered Lily's routine on a Tuesday afternoon in early October. They had been smoking cigarettes stolen from Kyle's father behind the park restrooms when they spotted the small figure sitting alone. "Well, look who it is," Kyle had called out, flicking his cigarette to the ground. "The mute freak." Zach and Jessica flanked him as they approached, their faces alight with the cruel anticipation of entertainment. Lily clutched her backpack, eyes darting toward her usual escape route, but Kyle was quicker. "What's in the bag?" "Freak. You got anything worth taking?" His hand shot out, grabbing the worn strap and yanking it from her grasp. Lily's mouth opened in a silent gasp as the contents spilled onto the dirt, her notebooks, a half-eaten sandwich, and the photograph that slipped from its careful hiding place in the front pocket. "What's this?" Jessica snatched up the photo, her lip curling into a sneer. "Aw, is this your dead mommy and daddy?" Something flickered in Kyle's eyes, perhaps the faintest recognition of a boundary that shouldn't be crossed, but it vanished as Zach laughed appreciatively at Jessica's cruelty. "Give it back," Lily whispered, her voice so faint and unused that the 3 bullies froze momentarily in shock. "She talks," Zach exclaimed with mock astonishment. "It's a miracle!" Kyle recovered quickly, snatching the photo from Jessica. "You want this back. Come and get it." He held it high above his head, far beyond Lily's desperate reach as she lunged toward him. What happened next would later be described differently by each participant. Jessica would claim that Lily had attacked them first. Zach would insist they were just playing around. Kyle would say nothing at all. The truth was simpler. Kyle ripped the photograph in half, and something inside Lily broke open. For the first time since the accident, she screamed a raw, primal sound that startled birds from nearby trees. She launched herself at Kyle, small fists pounding ineffectually against his chest as tears streamed down her face. The older boy shoved her hard, sending her sprawling onto the gravel path. "Crazy freak!" he shouted, genuinely rattled by her unexpected reaction. Lily scrambled to her knees, gathering the torn pieces of her precious photograph. "Let's get out of here," Jessica muttered, suddenly uncomfortable. But Kyle wasn't finished. His own humiliation at being frightened by a 7-year-old demanded retribution. "Not until orphan girl learns her lesson," he growled, advancing on Lily. He grabbed her arm, dragging her toward the street. "Maybe we should see if cars stop for you like they didn't for your parents." Lily struggled silently, the fight draining from her as quickly as it had erupted. The three bullies marched her to the intersection of Foster Street and Riverside Drive, where the afternoon traffic was picking up as people headed home from work. "Should we push her?" Zach asked nervously, glancing at the passing cars. "We're just scaring her," Kyle insisted, though the gleam in his eyes suggested he hadn't decided how far to take this game. "Unless the freak wants to apologize and promise to stay out of our park." Lily stared at the torn photograph in her hands, her parents' smiling faces now separated by a jagged line. She said nothing. "Have it your way," Kyle snapped, shoving her backward toward the curb. Lily's heel slipped off the edge just as a delivery truck approached. The driver hit his horn, startling Kyle, who instinctively pushed her harder in his own fright. Lily teetered on the brink of the street, arms pinwheeling for balance. From the shadows of the abandoned gas station across the street, the German shepherd had been watching. For weeks, this small human had been the only one who didn't throw rocks or shout when they saw him. She had shared her food without demanding anything in return. Now she was in danger. Despite the searing memories of human cruelty that made every fiber of his being want to run in the opposite direction. Shadow burst from his hiding place. His powerful body, though weakened by months on the street, propelled him across the intersection. Cars screeched to a halt as the scarred dog charged directly at the group of children. The bullies scattered in terror as Shadow planted himself between Lily and the street, his teeth bared in a warning snarl that rumbled from deep in his chest. Traffic had stopped completely now, drivers gawking at the unexpected standoff. Lily stared at her defender, this broken creature who had summoned such courage. Slowly, she reached out a trembling hand. Shadow flinched but held his ground, something beyond instinct keeping him there. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse. The German shepherd's ears twitched at the sound. For the first time in months, he allowed a human hand to touch him, Lily's small fingers gently brushing the top of his scarred head. They stood together on the edge of Foster Street, two damaged souls connecting in a moment that would change both their lives forever. Mrs. Winters discovered Lily missing at dinner that evening. The search that followed was brief but frantic, ending when Zach Turner's mother called Pinewood to report what her son had tearfully confessed, something about bullying, a stray dog, and the Foster Street intersection. By the time Mrs. Winters arrived at the scene, breathless and leaning heavily on her cane, She found only scattered notebook papers and half a photograph lying in the gutter. "Lily!" Her voice cracked with worry as she surveyed the darkening street. A passing motorist stopped to inform her that he'd seen a little girl walking with a large dog, heading east toward the residential area. "Mrs. Winters," called Officer Mitchell immediately. Lily had indeed gone east, but not to any residence. With gentle tugs on the sleeve of her jacket, Shadow had guided her to an abandoned equipment shed behind the old softball field at Riverside Park. The small structure, long forgotten by the Parks Department, had become one of Shadow's shelters during rainstorms. Inside, Lily found a nest of discarded blankets and newspapers, Shadow's attempt at comfort in a world that had shown him little. "Is this where you live?" she whispered, looking around the dimly lit space. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, but the floor was surprisingly clean. Shadow circled 3 times on his makeshift bed before settling down, his amber eyes never leaving the little girl. Lily sat beside him, carefully spreading out the torn halves of her photograph. "That's my mom and dad," she said, her voice gaining a hint of strength with each word spoken to this non-judgmental audience. "We were at the lake. Mom liked to collect shells, even though it's not the ocean." Her small finger traced her mother's smiling face. "They died in a car crash. I was there too, but I didn't die." Shadow whined softly, shifting closer until his warm body pressed against her side. Something about the child's scent tugged at his memory, a faint familiarity he couldn't place. Lily leaned against him, finding comfort in his solid presence. "The other kids think I'm weird because I don't talk," she continued. "But talking hurts. It makes me remember." She turned to look directly at Shadow. "Do you remember things that hurt too?" As if in answer, Shadow's body twitched in his sleep that night, low growls and whimpers escaping as his legs made running motions against invisible threats. Lily, who had curled up beside him on the blankets, placed her small hand on his heaving side. "It's okay," she murmured, the words she wished someone would say to her when she woke screaming from her own nightmares. "You're safe now." By morning, Officer Mitchell had organized a search party for the missing child. They found her footprints leading to the shed, but hesitated outside when they heard something unexpected: Lily's voice, having a one-sided conversation with someone inside. "I have to go back or they'll be worried," she was saying, "but I'll come get you later. I promise." When Officer Mitchell carefully pushed open the door, she found Lily sitting cross-legged on the floor, her hand buried in the fur of a scarred German shepherd who looked ready to bolt at the first sudden movement. "Lily," Mitchell said softly, staying in the doorway. "Everyone's been very concerned about you." The girl's expression shuttered immediately, the brief animation in her face disappearing behind the mask of silence that had become her protection. Shadow rose to his feet, a low growl building in his throat. "It's okay, boy," Mitchell said, keeping her voice even as she assessed the dog's condition. Despite his defensive posture, she could see he was malnourished and injured. "I'm not going to hurt either of you." Lily's hand tightened in Shadow's fur. "He saved me," she said, the words so quiet Mitchell almost missed them. "From Kyle and the street." Mitchell's eyebrows rose in surprise both at the statement and the fact that Lily had spoken at all, according to her file. These were the first words she'd spoken to an adult since the accident. "That was brave of him," Mitchell replied carefully. maintaining her position in the doorway. "He looks like he could use some food and care, though." Lily nodded, her blue eyes solemn. "They hurt him before, like Kyle hurt me." Something in the officer's chest tightened at the simple comparison. "Well, we need to get you back to Pinewood. Mrs. Winters is worried sick." She paused, considering the situation. "Your friend will need to stay here for now." "No." The word burst from Lily with surprising force. "He'll be alone. He needs me." Shadow pressed closer to the child, his posture protective rather than threatening. Mitchell observed the pair with growing curiosity. In 15 years on the force, she'd seen many stray dogs, most of them either fearful or aggressive after life on the streets. This one's behavior was unusual. "Let me make a call," Mitchell finally said, stepping back from the doorway to give them space. The conversation with Mrs. Winters was brief but intense. "Eleanor, she's talking to the dog. First words in 6 months. No, I understand the policy, but—" Mitchell glanced back at the shed. This might be important for her recovery. When she returned, Lily was whispering in Shadow's ear, the dog listening with an attentiveness that struck Mitchell as almost human in its understanding. "Lily," Mitchell said gently, "I've talked to Mrs. Winters. She says you can come back to Pinewood, and we'll figure out what to do about your friend. But first, I need to know if he's hurt anywhere specific." Lily nodded solemnly. "His back leg is hurt, and he has burn marks." Her voice trembled slightly. "Someone was mean to him." Mitchell nodded, careful to keep her expression neutral despite the anger that flared at the thought of such cruelty. "I know a vet who helps animals that have been hurt. Would you let me call him to look at your friend?" Lily considered this, her hand never leaving Shadow's fur. Finally, she nodded. "His name is Shadow," she said, "because he follows me like a shadow." "Shadow," Mitchell repeated. "That's a good name. How would you feel about Shadow coming back to Pinewood with us, just until he's checked out by the vet?" The change in Lily's expression was immediate, a flash of hope so pure it transformed her face. "He can come with me. Mrs. Winters says he can stay in the old gardening shed out back, just for a little while." Mitchell didn't mention the lengthy argument that had preceded this concession, or that Eleanor had only agreed because of the miracle of Lily speaking again. The journey back to Pinewood was a study in caution. Shadow, clearly unaccustomed to cars, had to be coaxed into the back seat of Mitchell's patrol vehicle. He settled only when Lily climbed in beside him, her small hand resting reassuringly on his back. Mitchell watched them in the rearview mirror, noting how the dog positioned himself between Lily and the door, protective even in this unfamiliar situation. Dr. James Cooper arrived at Pinewood an hour later, his weathered face creasing into a frown as he examined Shadow in the garden shed. Lily refused to leave during the examination, her previously silent nature forgotten as she answered the vet's questions about where she'd found Shadow and how he behaved. "He has nightmares," she informed Cooper seriously, "like I do." Cooper nodded, his gentle hands checking the dog's scarred flank. "Animals remember bad things that happen to them, just like people do," he explained, his tone respectful rather than condescending. Mrs. Winters observed from the doorway, her lined face a mixture of concern and amazement as Lily continued to speak more words than she'd uttered in 6 months combined. "Well," Cooper said finally, sitting back on his heels, "he's malnourished and has some infections in these burn areas, but nothing that can't be treated. The limp in his hind leg is from an old fracture that healed poorly. I can give him antibiotics and pain medication, but he'll always have that limp." "He's not dangerous?" Mrs. Winters asked, the practical question necessary despite the situation. Cooper shook his head. "I don't believe so. His behavior with Lily suggests he's bonded with her specifically. I'd be cautious with sudden movements and other children approaching him, but no, I don't see signs of human aggression." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small scanner. "Let's check if he has a microchip. He might have been someone's pet before." As Cooper passed the scanner over Shadow's shoulder blades, it emitted a faint beep. "There is a chip," he confirmed, "but it appears to be damaged. I'm only getting partial information." He frowned at the readout. The first few digits match a registration series from about 2 years ago, but the rest is corrupted. I'll need to check the database back at my office. Officer Mitchell, who had returned to check on the situation, stepped forward with unexpected eagerness. "What numbers did you get?" Cooper showed her the scanner display. Mitchell's expression changed. A flash of something recognition, concern crossing her features before she composed herself. "I should get going," she said abruptly. "Lily, I'll check on you and Shadow tomorrow." "Okay." Lily nodded, too focused on Shadow to notice the officer's strange reaction. Mrs. Winters, however, followed Mitchell outside. "Sarah," she called softly. "What is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." Mitchell stared at her patrol car for a long moment before answering. "Those first digits. They match a registration series used by the K-9 training program I worked with before joining patrol." She shook her head. "It's probably nothing. Thousands of dogs get registered in Chicago every year." But as she drove away from Pinewood, Mitchell couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that Shadow's appearance was not the coincidence it seemed. She took a detour, driving past the site of the accident that had claimed the Thompson family 6 months earlier. The intersection had been rebuilt, the guardrails replaced, no visible sign remaining of the tragedy that had occurred there. Mitchell's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she remembered the report she'd filed that night. Family of 3. Parents pronounced at scene. Child survived with minor injuries. Family dog missing. Presumed ejected from vehicle. She pulled over, her breath coming short as she recalled one detail she'd forgotten until now. The Thompson family had owned a German Shepherd. In the days that followed, Pinewood Children's Home witnessed a transformation in its quietest resident. Lily still spoke little to the other children or even the staff. But in the garden shed where Shadow had taken up residence, her voice flowed freely. Mrs. Winters would pause outside, feather duster in hand, listening to the one-sided conversations with a mixture of hope and concern. "My teacher gave me a gold star today," Lily would tell Shadow, her small fingers gently applying the antibiotic ointment Dr. Cooper had left for his burns. "I wrote a whole page about animals. I wrote about you." Shadow would listen attentively, his amber eyes following her movements, his tail offering a gentle thump against the shed floor when she showed him her school papers. The change in the dog was nearly as remarkable as the change in the child. While still cautious around adults, he had begun to accept Mrs. Winters' presence, even taking treats from her weathered hand after the first week. "Never seen anything like it," Cooper remarked during his follow-up visit. "Burns like these usually leave dogs permanently fearful of humans." He watched as Shadow allowed Lily to examine his healing scars. "Whatever happened to him was severe. Those aren't accidental injuries." "Who would do such a thing to an animal?" Mrs. Winters asked, her voice hushed to avoid disturbing the pair. Cooper's expression darkened. "Someone who enjoys causing pain." The cigarette burns on his muzzle were deliberate punishment. "Most likely. And the larger burn along his flank?" He shook his head. "That's consistent with someone holding him against something hot, a radiator, perhaps, or a stove." Mrs. Winters pressed a hand to her mouth. "Just like some of our children," she whispered. "The marks of cruelty change, but the intent remains the same." The vet nodded grimly. "That's why they understand each other. Trauma recognizes trauma." Lily had begun sleeping in the shed despite Mrs. Winters' initial objections. The elderly woman had relented after finding Lily's bed empty 3 nights in a row, only to discover her curled against Shadow's side in the small outbuilding, sleeping more peacefully than she had in months. "It can't be a permanent solution," Mrs. Winters told Officer Mitchell during her weekly visit. "The licensing board would have my head if they knew I was letting a child sleep in a garden shed with a stray dog." Mitchell surveyed the unlikely pair through the shed's small window. "Have you found any potential placement for Shadow yet?" Mrs. Winters sighed, rubbing her arthritic hands together. "The rescue organizations are all at capacity. With his history of abuse and injuries, he's not considered highly adoptable." She lowered her voice. "The municipal shelter would be our only option. And you know their euthanasia rates for adult German shepherds with health issues." Mitchell's jaw tightened. "Give me a little more time. I'm working on something." That something had consumed Mitchell's off-duty hours for the past week. The partial microchip number had led her through a labyrinth of paperwork and phone calls, from the canine training program to a breeder in Wisconsin, and finally to adoption records from the Thompson family. She had requested the accident file as well, poring over the details she'd tried so hard to forget. The photographs showed the mangled guardrail, the crushed sedan, the scattered contents of the Thompson family's life across Highway 41. One image in particular had caught her attention, a singed and torn dog collar near the rear of the vehicle. The report noted that the family dog had not been found at the scene, with the assumption that it had either fled or been killed and carried off by scavengers. Mitchell had visited the accident site twice now, walking the surrounding area, trying to reconstruct what might have happened to a dog ejected from a vehicle. The answer came not from her investigation, but from Animal Control's records. A German shepherd with burn injuries had been picked up 3 miles from the crash site the following day. He had escaped the facility within 48 hours by breaking through a damaged kennel door. The intake photo showed a traumatized animal with fresh burns across his flank and muzzle. Burns that matched the pattern of a car fire. Now, watching Lily and Shadow together, Mitchell struggled with the implications. If this was indeed the Thompson family dog, he hadn't simply been in the accident he had tried to help. The burn pattern suggested he had attempted to pull someone from the burning vehicle. "Has Lily said anything about recognizing him?" Mitchell asked Mrs. Winters, keeping her voice casual. The older woman shook her head. "Nothing specific, though yesterday she did ask if Shadow could sleep in her room because he did before." She frowned. "I assumed she meant at the shed." Mitchell nodded, filing away this information. She wasn't ready to share her suspicions, not without confirmation. The consequences of giving Lily false hope about a connection to her past would be devastating if she was wrong. Inside the shed, Lily was showing Shadow a drawing she had made in art therapy, a house with 4 figures in front of it. "That's my mom and dad," she explained, pointing to the adult figures. "And that's me." Her finger moved to a small figure with yellow hair. Then she pointed to the 4th figure, a large dog with a distinctive mark on its side. "And that's you. We're a family," Shadow whined softly, nudging her hand with his nose. Lily looked into his eyes, a question forming that had been growing in her mind for days. "You remember me, don't you?" she whispered. "From before?" Shadow's ears pricked forward at her words, his head tilting slightly. Lily reached for her backpack and carefully removed something she had kept hidden, the singed remnant of a blue collar. Mrs. Winters had given it to her after the accident, explaining it had belonged to their family dog who had not survived the crash. She held it out to Shadow, who sniffed it cautiously. His reaction was subtle, a slight tensing, a deeper inhalation. To anyone else, it might have meant nothing. But Lily saw recognition in his eyes. "It was you," she said, her voice stronger now with certainty. "You were our Max." The name triggered something in Shadow. He made a soft sound, neither a whine nor a bark, and pressed his muzzle against her hand. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. "You found me again," she whispered, tears soaking into his coat. "You found me." Outside the shed, October was giving way to November. The maple trees lining Pinewood's driveway blazed with color before surrendering their leaves to the increasingly chill winds. Dr. Cooper's visits became less frequent as Shadow's physical wounds healed, leaving only the scars as permanent reminders of his ordeal. "He's made remarkable progress," Cooper told Mrs. Winters during what would be his final professional visit. "Nutritionally, he's almost where he should be, and the infections have cleared." He watched Shadow following Lily around the yard, always maintaining a protective distance of a few feet. "The emotional healing will take longer." "Of course. For both of them," Mrs. Winters agreed, her eyes on Lily, who was actually smiling as she tossed a tennis ball for Shadow to retrieve. "Have you given any thought to my suggestion?" Cooper asked, packing his veterinary supplies. Mrs. Winters sighed. "A therapy dog program sounds wonderful in theory, but the licensing requirements for the home would be covered under the children's mental health provisions," Cooper finished. "I've looked into it. Shadow would need to be certified, of course, but with his bond with Lily, I think he could qualify for individual therapy animal status." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the front of the building. Kyle Matthews and his father had arrived for their court-mandated meeting with Mrs. Winters. The incident at Foster Street had finally been reported, resulting in Kyle facing juvenile probation for endangerment. Part of his sentence included a restorative justice component, weekly meetings with Lily and a counselor to address the bullying. "I don't see why we gotta waste time on this," Mr. Matthews grumbled as they approached the main entrance. His voice carried across the yard, causing Shadow's head to snap up from the ball he'd been retrieving. "Boys' roughhouse. Ain't his fault the foster kid can't take it." Lily froze at the sound of Kyle's voice. Shadow was instantly at her side, his body tense, a low rumble building in his chest. "It's okay," she whispered to him. though her own face had gone pale. "We have to go inside now." Shadow followed as she reluctantly made her way toward the building. Kyle spotted them approaching and took an instinctive step backward when he saw the German shepherd. "That's the dog from the street," he said, his usual bravado noticeably dimmed. "The one that almost bit me." "He didn't try to bite you," Lily said, her voice small but clear. "He was protecting me." Kyle's father snorted dismissively. "Looks like a dangerous mutt to me. Probably should have been put down." The words hung in the air like a physical threat. Shadow's growl deepened, and Lily's hand tightened in his fur. "Shadow wouldn't hurt anyone unless they were hurting me," she said, her chin lifting slightly in defiance. Mrs. Winters intervened, ushering everyone inside with practiced diplomacy. "Mr. Matthews, Kyle, why don't we continue this conversation in my office, Lily? Perhaps you could take Shadow back to the shed for now." The meeting was predictably tense. Kyle sat slumped in his chair, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. His father dominated the conversation with excuses and deflections until the counselor, Ms. Peterson, firmly redirected the discussion. "Kyle," she said gently, "can you tell Lily how you felt that day at the intersection?" The boy shifted uncomfortably. "Dunno," he muttered. Then, after a pointed look from Ms. Peterson, he added, "Wasn't trying to hurt her. Not really. Just scared her." "I was scared," Lily confirmed quietly. It was the first time she had spoken directly to Kyle since the incident. "Yeah, well." Kyle glanced toward his father, then back at his shoes. "Sorry about your picture." It wasn't much, as apologies went, but Ms. Peterson nodded encouragingly. "That's a good start. Kyle?" She turned to Lily. "Is there anything you'd like to say to Kyle?" Lily considered this carefully. "Your dad is mean to you, isn't he?" she finally asked. The room went deadly silent. Mr. Matthews straightened in his chair, his face flushing dark red. "Now, wait just a minute. Lily," Mrs. Winters interjected. "That's not an appropriate—" "It's okay," Kyle interrupted, his voice barely audible. "She's right." He raised his eyes to meet Lily's for the first time. "How did you know?" Lily's answer was simple. "Shadow was hurt by someone mean too. He acts like you sometimes." The implications of this innocent observation reverberated through the room. Ms. Peterson exchanged a meaningful glance with Mrs. Winters. Mr. Matthews pushed back from the table, chair legs screeching against the floor. "This is bull," he caught himself, eyes darting to the adults. "This is ridiculous. We're done here. Mr. Matthews, Ms. Peterson began, but he was already heading for the door, gesturing impatiently for Kyle to follow. The boy hesitated, looking at Lily with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. "Is your dog really named Shadow?" he asked suddenly. Lily nodded. "That's—" Kyle almost smiled. "That's actually pretty cool." As the Matthews departed, Mrs. Winters placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "That was very brave of you to speak up," she said, "but also very perceptive about Kyle's situation." Lily shrugged. "Shadow taught me." He knows when people are hurt inside. Later that evening, as Lily prepared to join Shadow in the shed for the night, Officer Mitchell arrived for an unscheduled visit. Her expression was serious as she asked to speak with Mrs. Winters privately. "I've confirmed it," Mitchell said once they were alone in the office. "The microchip registration matches. Shadow was formerly Max, the Thompson family dog." She placed a folder on the desk. "He was adopted from the shelter where I volunteered before joining the force. I didn't make the connection initially because the record showed he died in the accident." Mrs. Winters opened the folder, examining the adoption photo of a younger, unscarred German shepherd with a blue collar. "Have you told Lily?" Mitchell shook her head. "Not yet. I wanted to discuss how to approach this with you first." She hesitated. "There's more to the story that I've uncovered, about the accident itself." As Mitchell outlined what she had learned, Mrs. Winters' expression grew increasingly troubled. "My God," she whispered when Mitchell finished. "How will we ever explain this to her?" "I don't know," Mitchell admitted. "But she deserves the truth. And there's another complication." She pulled a different document from her bag. "The home inspection from the licensing board is scheduled for next Wednesday. If they find an unauthorized dog on the premises, they could revoke our license," Mrs. Winters finished, pressing her fingers to her temples. "I'm aware." "I've been thinking about that," Mitchell said carefully. "What if there was another option for both Lily and Shadow?" Before Mrs. Winters could respond, a commotion erupted from the direction of the yard. They rushed outside to find several children gathered at the edge of the property, pointing toward the road where a man was trying to coax Shadow into a van. "Hey!" Mitchell shouted, breaking into a run. "Step away from the dog!" The man looked up, startled. When he saw Mitchell's uniform, he quickly released the rope he had looped around Shadow's neck and jumped into the van. The vehicle sped away before Mitchell could reach it, though she managed to glimpse the license plate. Shadow was trembling violently, his previous confidence shattered by the encounter. Lily pushed through the gathering crowd of children and threw her arms around his neck, tears streaming down her face. "What happened?" Mrs. Winters demanded, looking at the older children who had witnessed the incident. "Some guy said the dog was his," explained Darius, one of the teenagers. "Said it ran away months ago and he'd been looking everywhere. But when he tried to get Shadow in his van, the dog went crazy, snarling and fighting. Then Lily came running out screaming, and the guy got nervous." Mitchell knelt beside Shadow, who was still shaking. "It's okay, boy," she murmured, carefully examining him for injuries. "You're safe now." Lily looked up at the officer, her face streaked with tears. "He was going to take Shadow away." "No one's going to take him," Mitchell assured her, though her eyes met Mrs. Winters over the girl's head, acknowledging the impossible promise. That night, Mrs. Winters made an exception to the rules and allowed Shadow to sleep in Lily's room. The experience had clearly traumatized both of them, reopening emotional wounds that had just begun to heal. Mitchell stayed late, making calls about the license plate she'd observed. By midnight, she had a name, Victor Reeves, a man with a history of animal cruelty complaints. Nothing that had stuck in court, but the pattern was clear enough to those who investigated such cases. "He must have recognized Shadow from the neighborhood," Mitchell told Mrs. Winters as they sat in the kitchen, voices low to avoid waking the children. "Maybe he was even the original abuser, looking to reclaim his property." Mrs. Winters shuddered at the thought. "What can we do?" "I've filed a report, but without proof." Mitchell's voice trailed off. They both knew how these cases typically ended, with insufficient evidence and no justice for the animals. "But there's something else we need to consider. If Reeves comes back, he would be threatening not just Shadow but Lily and potentially all our children," Mrs. Winters finished gravely. The solution seemed clear, if painful. Shadow would need to be relocated for everyone's safety. But the timing couldn't have been worse, just as Lily had begun to heal, just as she had rediscovered a connection to her past. The following morning brought new complications. Lily woke with a harsh, raspy cough that seemed to come from deep in her chest. Mrs. Winters felt her forehead, frowning at the heat radiating from the child's skin. "You're burning up," she said, already reaching for the thermometer. "How long have you been feeling sick?" Lily shook her head, unwilling to admit to the symptoms she'd been hiding for days. The thermometer confirmed Mrs. Winters' fears, 102.3 degrees. "I'm calling Dr. Michaels," she decided, referring to the pediatrician who served most of Pinewood's children. "And you're staying in bed today." Shadow refused to leave Lily's side as her condition worsened throughout the day. The dog seemed to sense something the humans had missed, whining anxiously whenever Lily's breathing became more labored. By evening, when Dr. Michaels finally arrived, Lily was struggling for each breath, her lips taking on a bluish tinge. "She needs a hospital," the doctor declared after a brief examination. "This isn't a simple cold or flu. Her lung sounds indicate possible pneumonia. And with her history—" He glanced at Mrs. Winters meaningfully. The medical records from the accident had noted smoke inhalation damage to Lily's lungs, making her more susceptible to respiratory infections. What might be a straightforward illness for another child could become life-threatening for her. "I'll call an ambulance," Mrs. Winters said, already reaching for the phone. Lily's panic became evident as soon as she understood she would be separated from Shadow. "No," she gasped between labored breaths. "Can't leave him. The bad man will come back. Shadow will be safe here," Mrs. Winters promised, though the worry in her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. "You don't understand," Lily insisted, her voice weakening. "He saved me from the fire. After Mom and Dad." She broke off, coughing violently. Mrs. Winters and Dr. Michaels exchanged concerned glances. Was this fevered rambling, or had Lily somehow recovered memories of the accident? "Shadow will be right here when you get back," Mrs. Winters said gently. "Officer Mitchell is staying tonight to keep an eye on things." But as the paramedics prepared to transport Lily, Shadow became increasingly agitated. He paced the room, whining and pawing at the stretcher. When they finally wheeled Lily toward the ambulance, the dog attempted to follow, only to be held back by Mitchell. "I'm sorry, boy," she murmured as Shadow strained against her grip. "You can't go with her. Can't go with—" The moment the ambulance pulled away, Shadow's demeanor changed. The fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a dejected vigilance. He took up position at the window overlooking the driveway, his eyes fixed on the point where the ambulance had disappeared. Mitchell watched him with growing concern. "He knows something's wrong with her," she said to Mrs. Winters, "beyond just being separated." That night, as rain began to fall outside Pinewood, Mitchell made a decision. The pieces had come together in her mind: Shadow's behavior, the microchip confirmation, Lily's fevered comments about the fire. There was only one explanation that made sense of everything. She waited until Mrs. Winters had gone to bed before slipping into Lily's room to retrieve the girl's worn backpack. Inside, she found what she was looking for: the singed remnant of a blue collar and a zippered plastic bag containing half of the torn photograph. The other half would be in the garden shed, Mitchell guessed, where Lily had been when Kyle took the original. "Come on, Shadow," she whispered, holding out the collar. "We're going on a trip." The dog hesitated, looking back toward the window where he'd maintained his vigil. "It's about Lily," Mitchell added. "About helping her." Those words seemed to reach him. Shadow rose and followed Mitchell to her patrol car, jumping into the back seat without his usual reluctance. As they drove through the rainy night toward Chicago Memorial Hospital, Mitchell made a call to Dr. Cooper. "James, it's Sarah Mitchell. I need a favor, and it can't wait until morning." Chicago Memorial Hospital's pediatric wing was bathed in the artificial calm of 3 a.m., that peculiar quiet punctuated by the soft beeping of monitors and the squeak of nurses' shoes on polished floors. In room 412, Lily Thompson slept fitfully, an oxygen mask covering her small face, IV antibiotics dripping steadily into her arm. The pneumonia had progressed rapidly, her compromised lungs struggling against the infection that had taken hold. Dr. Cooper waited in the hospital parking lot, his veterinary credentials hanging around his neck, a folder of hastily assembled documents under his arm. When Officer Mitchell's patrol car pulled in beside his truck, he approached with a concerned expression. "You're sure about this?" he asked, glancing at Shadow in the back seat. "It's highly irregular." Mitchell nodded, her face drawn with fatigue and worry. "I've never been more certain of anything." She handed him the Ziploc bag containing the torn photograph and singed collar. "These are the missing pieces, James. They confirm everything." Cooper examined the items, his expression growing solemn. "And the hospital administration?" "I called in every favor I had," Mitchell replied. "Dr. Patel in pediatrics served with me on the community safety board. She's waiting for us at the service entrance." Shadow watched this exchange with alert attention, his body tense with anticipation. Since leaving Pinewood, he had grown increasingly restless, as if sensing their destination's importance. "What about the therapy dog certification?" Cooper asked. "Without that, they won't—" "Already handled," Mitchell interrupted, producing a temporary certification she'd convinced a colleague at the K-9 unit to process as an emergency. "It's not strictly by the book, but it's legal enough for tonight." Cooper smiled, despite the gravity of the situation. Sarah Mitchell bending rules. Never thought I'd see the day. "Some rules matter less than others," she replied simply. Dr. Patel met them as promised, her dark eyes widening slightly at the sight of Shadow's scars. "This is the dog?" she asked, her voice hushed. "The one from the accident?" Mitchell nodded. "The very same. How is she?" "Stable for now, but struggling," Dr. Patel replied, leading them through the quiet corridors. "The infection is aggressive, And she's fighting us on the treatments. Refuses to keep the oxygen mask on. Keeps calling for Shadow and Max in her sleep. Both the same dog, Cooper explained quietly. Different names from different chapters of his life. Dr. Patel swiped her badge across a security reader, unlocking the pediatric ward. I've cleared this with the night supervisor as a therapeutic intervention, but I can only give you 30 minutes. If there's any negative reaction, or if her vitals destabilize, we'll leave immediately, Mitchell promised. The door to room 412 opened with a soft hiss. The lighting was dim, casting Lily's small form in gentle shadow. Even in sleep, her breathing was visibly labored, her chest rising and falling with uncomfortable effort. Monitors displayed her elevated heart rate and concerning oxygen levels. Shadow froze in the doorway. His ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring as he caught Lily's scent mingled with the sharp tang of antiseptics and illness. A small whine escaped him, not of fear, but recognition. "It's okay, boy," Mitchell whispered, gently guiding him forward. "You can go to her." Shadow approached the bed cautiously, his nails clicking softly on the linoleum floor. When he reached the bedside, he stretched his neck forward, sniffing Lily's hand where it lay atop the blanket. Another whine, softer this time, as he pressed his muzzle against her fingers. The contact seemed to register in Lily's consciousness. Her eyelids fluttered, and her fingers twitched against Shadow's fur. "Max," she murmured, the word muffled by the oxygen mask. Shadow's tail gave a single wag. He moved closer, resting his head on the edge of the mattress near her shoulder. The three adults watched in silence as Lily's eyes opened fully, confusion giving way to wonder as she registered Shadow's presence. "You came," she whispered, reaching to push away the oxygen mask. "Lily, you need to keep that on," Dr. Patel said, stepping forward, but Shadow was already responding in his own way. He gently bumped his nose against the mask, then rested his head near her chest, his eyes fixed on hers as if telling her to leave it in place. Remarkably, Lily complied, settling back against the pillows while keeping one hand buried in Shadow's fur. "His presence is already helping," Dr. Patel observed, checking the monitors. "Her heart rate is coming down, and her oxygen saturation is improving slightly." Mitchell nodded, unsurprised. They have a connection that goes beyond what we can see. For the next 20 minutes, they witnessed something that straddled the line between medicine and miracle. With Shadow by her side, Lily's breathing eased. She remained awake but calm, her focus entirely on the dog who had somehow found his way to her again. "Lily," Mitchell said gently, approaching the bed, "I need to tell you something important about Shadow. Something I discovered." The girl's eyes, bright with fever, turned toward the officer. "He was our dog," she said with unexpected clarity. "Before the accident. His name was Max." Mitchell blinked in surprise. "You remember?" Lily nodded, her fingers tracing one of the scars on Shadow's head. "Not at first, but when I found his collar in my backpack, I started remembering things. He used to sleep under my bed when I had bad dreams." Mitchell exchanged a glance with Cooper, who nodded encouragingly. "That's right," she confirmed. Max belonged to your family the night of the accident. He was in the car with you. Lily's expression grew distant, remembering. There was fire. After the crash, Mom and Dad wouldn't wake up. Her voice wavered. Max tried to pull them out. That's how he got burned. The adults in the room felt the weight of this revelation. Shadow Max had attempted to rescue his family from the burning vehicle. He saved me, Lily continued, her voice growing fainter as fatigue began to overtake her. Pulled me away from the car before it exploded. Then he ran away when the loud sirens came. Mitchell's throat tightened with emotion. The accident report had noted that Lily had been found several yards from the vehicle, a detail that had puzzled investigators given the severity of the crash. The assumption had been that she'd been ejected through a window, but her injuries hadn't aligned with that theory. Now, the truth was clear. The family dog had pulled her to safety before fleeing the traumatic scene. He found you again, Mitchell said softly. After all this time, he found you and saved you again at Foster Street. Lily nodded, her eyelids growing heavy. We found each other, she corrected, the words slurring slightly as she drifted toward sleep. Because we're family. Dr. Patel checked her watch reluctantly. I'm sorry, but we need to wrap this up. The shift change is coming, and I can't guarantee the day supervisor will be as understanding. Mitchell nodded, reaching to guide Shadow away from the bed. But the dog planted his feet, refusing to move, a low whine building in his throat as Lily's hand slipped from his fur. Shadow, Mitchell said firmly. We have to go now. The dog looked at her with such human understanding and pleading that Mitchell felt her resolve waver. Dr. Cooper stepped in, kneeling beside Shadow. We'll come back, he promised, his voice gentle but firm. Lily needs to rest now. And so do you. Something in his tone reached Shadow, who reluctantly allowed himself to be led from the room. At the doorway, he paused for one last look at the sleeping child, then followed the adults into the corridor. That was remarkable, Dr. Patel said once they were outside. In 30 years of medicine, I've never seen such an immediate response to an intervention. She hesitated. Would it be possible to arrange another visit from a medical perspective? I believe Shadow's presence is genuinely beneficial to her recovery. We'll make it happen, Mitchell promised, already formulating a plan in her mind. The return to Pinewood was accomplished in the pre-dawn hours, Shadow resuming his position at Lily's window as if he had never left. Mrs. Winters, awakening to find Mitchell dozing in a chair by the front door, listened to the night's events with widening eyes. So, it's true, she whispered. He really was their family dog. Mitchell nodded wearily. And he saved her life. Twice now. Mrs. Winters glanced toward the window where Shadow maintained his vigil. What happens now, with the inspection coming? I'm working on that, Mitchell assured her. But first, we need to focus on getting Lily well again. The next 3 days passed in a rhythm of hospital visits and mounting concern. Lily's condition improved slightly, then plateaued, her body struggling against the infection. Shadow grew increasingly agitated at Pinewood, refusing food and barely sleeping, his attention fixed on the driveway as if willing Lily's return. On the 4th evening, as Mitchell arrived for her now regular visit to Pinewood, She found an unexpected vehicle in the driveway, a battered white van that matched the description of Victor Reeves's vehicle. "Mrs. Winters," she called, entering the house with her hand instinctively moving toward her holstered weapon. "Eleanor." The elderly woman emerged from her office, her face pale. "He's here," she whispered. "The man who tried to take Shadow. He showed up with papers claiming ownership." Mitchell's blood ran cold. "Where are they now?" "Out back, by the shed. Some of the older boys are with them. I was just about to call you." Mitchell moved swiftly through the house and into the backyard. There she found a tense standoff. Reeves, a wiry man with a pockmarked face, was attempting to approach the garden shed where Shadow had retreated. 3 teenage boys from Pinewood formed a protective line between them. "Sir," Mitchell called, her voice carrying the full authority of her position. "Step away from the shed immediately." Reeves turned, his expression darkening when he saw her uniform. "This is a private matter. Officer, that's my dog, and I have the papers to prove it." He waved a wrinkled document in her direction. "Those papers weren't sufficient last time, and they won't be today," Mitchell replied, moving closer. "That dog is evidence in an ongoing investigation." "Investigation of what?" Reeves demanded, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "Animal cruelty. For starters." Mitchell nodded toward the shed. "Those burn marks didn't happen by accident." Reeves' expression hardened. "You can't prove anything. Dogs get into all sorts of trouble on their own." "Maybe," Mitchell agreed, continuing her approach. "But we can certainly investigate the matter thoroughly, including your history of complaints." The man's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." "There's nothing on my record." "Nothing that stuck," Mitchell corrected. "But 5 complaints in 3 years creates a pattern. Mr. Reeves, one worth examining very closely." The standoff might have continued if not for the sudden appearance of Shadow himself. The German shepherd emerged from the shed, not cowering as expected, but standing tall, a low growl rumbling in his chest as he fixed his gaze on Reeves. The man took an involuntary step backward. "That dog's dangerous," he said, his earlier confidence evaporating. "Look at him, he's aggressive." "He's protective," Mitchell countered, "of himself and these children, as he has every right to be." Shadow advanced slowly, his posture making his intentions clear. Reeves was not welcome here. The teenagers moved aside, allowing the dog to position himself directly between the man and the home. "Call him off," Reeves demanded, continuing to retreat. "Or I'll file a dangerous animal report." "You're trespassing on private property after being asked to leave," Mitchell replied calmly. "Shadow is merely helping to escort you off the premises." She gestured toward the side gate. "I suggest you take the hint." For a moment, it seemed Reeves might argue further. Then Shadow took another deliberate step forward, and the man's nerve broke. He turned and hurried toward the gate, pausing only to shout back, "This isn't over," once the sound of his van faded into the distance. Mitchell knelt beside Shadow, examining him for any signs of injury. "Good boy," she murmured. "Very good boy." The teenagers approached cautiously, their expressions a mixture of awe and relief. "That was awesome," Darius said, grinning. "Shadow wasn't even scared of him this time," Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. "Because he wasn't alone." She looked around at the protective circle that had formed children and adults united to protect a dog who had already suffered too much. None of us are alone anymore. The moment was interrupted by the ringing of Mitchell's phone. She answered quickly when she saw the hospital's number on the caller ID. "Officer Mitchell? This is Dr. Patel," the voice on the other end said without preamble. "You need to come to the hospital right away. Lily's condition has taken a turn for the worse." The pediatric intensive care unit at Chicago Memorial was a world removed from the regular ward, a place where the beeping of monitors took on new urgency, and where the hushed conversations of medical staff carried the weight of life and death decisions. Lily lay in the center of this controlled chaos, her small form dwarfed by the equipment surrounding her bed. The infection had spread, causing her oxygen levels to plummet and her fever to spike dangerously high. Mitchell stood at the observation window, her forehead pressed against the cool glass as she watched the medical team work. Dr. Patel emerged from the room, her face drawn with concern. "We've started her on a broader spectrum antibiotic," she explained, removing her mask. "The cultures show a resistant strain of pneumonia, likely hospital-acquired. Her compromised lung function from the accident is complicating matters." "What are her chances?" Mitchell asked, the question direct and terrible in its simplicity. Dr. Patel hesitated. "We're doing everything we can. The next 24 hours will be critical." She glanced back at the room. "She's been asking for Shadow whenever she's conscious. I believe his presence had a significant positive impact on her condition during the last visit." Mitchell nodded, her mind racing through possibilities. "I left him at Pinewood with Dr. Paul Cooper after what happened with Reeves. I didn't want to risk moving him until I had a secure plan." "I understand the complications," Dr. Patel said. "But from a medical perspective, I believe Shadow's presence could help stabilize her emotional state, which might give her immune system the boost it needs." The hospital administrator was less easily convinced. "A therapy dog is one thing," he said when Mitchell approached him. "But you're talking about bringing a formerly stray dog with no formal certification into our ICU. The liability alone—" "This isn't just any dog," Mitchell interrupted. "This is Lily's family dog who saved her from the car accident that killed her parents. He's the only connection she has left to her life before the trauma." The administrator's expression softened slightly. "I sympathize with the situation, Officer Mitchell, but we have protocols. Sometimes protocols need to be adjusted for extraordinary circumstances." Dr. Patel interjected, joining the conversation. "I've reviewed the literature on therapy animals in critical care settings. The potential benefits far outweigh the risks, especially given their established bond." The debate continued until a compromise was reached. Shadow would be allowed a brief, supervised visit, provided he was bathed and examined by the hospital's infectious disease specialist first. Mitchell immediately called Cooper to make the arrangements. As she ended the call, Mrs. Winters approached from the waiting area, her lined face pale with worry. "Any change?" she asked. Mitchell shook her head. "Not yet. But we've secured permission for Shadow to visit." Mrs. Winters nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Kyle Matthews is here." "Kyle?" Mitchell's brow furrowed in confusion. "Why would he?" "He heard about Lily's condition from one of our staff. He's been in the waiting room for hours, refused to leave even when his father called demanding he come home." Mrs. Winters lowered her voice. "Sarah, I think he's genuinely concerned." Mitchell found Kyle huddled in a corner chair of the waiting room, his usual bravado entirely absent. When he looked up and saw her approaching, his eyes were red-rimmed. "Is she going to die?" he asked bluntly, the question containing all the terrible directness of childhood. Mitchell sat beside him, choosing her words carefully. "The doctors are doing everything they can. Lily is very sick, but she's also very strong." Kyle nodded, staring at his sneakers. "It's my fault," he said after a long silence. "If I hadn't pushed her that day, none of this would have happened." "That's not true," Mitchell said gently. "Lily's illness is related to damage from the accident that killed her parents. What happened between you two didn't cause this." "But I made everything worse for her," Kyle insisted. "She was already sad, and I just wanted to—" He trailed off, struggling to articulate complex emotions. "I don't know why I did it. My dad says I'm just like him, and I hate that." The raw honesty in his voice struck Mitchell. "Kyle, listen to me. You're not defined by your father's actions or by your past mistakes. What matters is what you choose to do now." The boy looked up, his expression cautiously hopeful. "Like what?" "Like being here," Mitchell replied. "Showing that you care. That's a good start." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Cooper with Shadow. The German shepherd had been bathed, his coat gleaming under the harsh hospital lights, a temporary therapy dog vest fitted around his chest. He scanned the waiting room anxiously, clearly searching for Lily. "Shadow!" Kyle exclaimed, startling both the dog and the adults. Shadow's ears flattened momentarily as he recognized one of Lily's tormentors. "It's okay," Mitchell soothed, placing a calming hand on Shadow's back. "Kyle is a friend now." The boy approached cautiously, stopping a respectful distance away. "I'm sorry," he said directly to Shadow, as if the dog could understand every word, "for scaring Lily, and for calling you a dangerous mutt." Shadow regarded him steadily, his amber eyes assessing. Then, in a gesture that left Mitchell momentarily speechless, the dog stepped forward and gently nudged Kyle's hand with his nose, not quite forgiveness, perhaps, but acknowledgement. The procedure for bringing Shadow into the ICU was methodical and careful. After examination by the infectious disease specialist, he was fitted with special booties to protect against contamination. Dr. Patel personally escorted them to Lily's room, explaining the situation to the attending nurses. "Remember, at the first sign of distress, or if her vitals destabilize, we remove him immediately," she instructed. Shadow entered the room with uncharacteristic caution, seeming to understand instinctively the fragility of the situation. His ears were pricked forward, nose working as he processed the unfamiliar sense of medication and illness. When he reached Lily's bedside, he whined softly, distressed by her condition. "It's okay, boy," Mitchell whispered. "She needs you." As if understanding, Shadow settled himself beside the bed, resting his head near Lily's hand where it lay motionless on the blanket. For several minutes, nothing happened. The monitors continued their steady beeping, and Lily remained unconscious, her breathing assisted by the oxygen mask. Dr. Patel checked her watch. her expression concerned. "Perhaps we should—" She was interrupted by a subtle change. Lily's fingers twitched, then slowly moved to touch Shadow's fur. Her eyelids fluttered open, unfocused at first, then clearing as she registered the dog's presence. "Shadow," she whispered, the word barely audible beneath the oxygen mask. "You came back." The dog's tail thumped gently against the floor, his eyes never leaving her face. Lily's vital signs began to show immediate improvement, her heart rate stabilizing, her oxygen levels incrementally rising. "Remarkable," Dr. Patel murmured, watching the monitors. "This connection between them is something I've never seen before." Mitchell nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "They saved each other," she said simply. The approved 15-minute visit stretched to 20, then 30, as Lily's condition continued to stabilize. When they finally had to leave, Shadow resisted, planting his feet and looking back at Lily with such obvious distress that even the most skeptical nurse was moved. "We'll bring him back tomorrow," Mitchell promised Lily. "If you keep fighting, Shadow will be right here waiting for you." The girl nodded weakly, her eyes already drifting closed again, but her vital signs remained stronger than they had been before the visit. In the corridor outside, Mitchell found Kyle still waiting, his expression anxious. "How is she?" "A little better," Mitchell replied honestly. "Shadow's visit seemed to help." Kyle nodded, relief evident in his young face. "Good. That's good." He hesitated. "My dad called again. He's really mad." The implication was clear in his tone. Returning home would mean consequences. Mitchell made a swift decision. "How about I give you a ride? I can explain to your father that you were helping with an important police matter." The grateful look in Kyle's eyes told her everything she needed to know about what awaited him at home. As they walked toward the elevator, Shadow between them, Mitchell's resolve hardened. This situation went beyond Lily and Shadow. Now it encompassed Kyle, too. Another child suffering in silence. The drive to the Matthews home was tense with unspoken concerns. Kyle grew increasingly quiet as they approached, his shoulders hunching forward in unconscious self-protection. Shadow, sensing the boy's distress from the back seat, leaned forward to rest his muzzle on Kyle's shoulder. "He likes you," Mitchell observed, watching the interaction in the rearview mirror. "Why?" Kyle asked, genuinely puzzled. "After what I did to Lily." "Because you're trying to make it right," Mitchell replied. "Animals sense these things sometimes better than people do." As they pulled up to the modest house with its peeling paint and overgrown yard, Kyle's father emerged onto the porch, his expression thunderous. Shadow's posture immediately changed, his body tensing as he detected the threat. "Stay in the car," Mitchell instructed Kyle, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Both of you." She stepped out to meet Mr. Matthews, her badge clearly visible. What transpired next would later become a turning point in multiple lives, a conversation that began with hostility and ended with Mitchell making a call to Child Protective Services. When she returned to the car, her expression was grim but determined. "Kyle, you're going to stay with Mrs. Winters at Pinewood tonight, just until we sort some things out." The boy nodded, relief and fear mingling in his expression. "What about Lily?" he asked as they pulled away from the curb. "Will you tell her I'm sorry, really sorry?" "You can tell her yourself," Mitchell replied. "When she gets better." "If she gets better," Kyle corrected, voicing the fear they all carried. Shadow whined softly from the back seat, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, as if he could will them back to the hospital and to Lily's side. Dr. Cooper's veterinary clinic was quiet in the early morning hours, the examination rooms dark and the kennels filled with the soft sounds of sleeping animals. In his office, surrounded by reference books and illuminated only by a desk lamp, the veterinarian studied the damaged microchip data from Shadow with renewed determination. What had begun as a professional courtesy to Officer Mitchell had evolved into a personal mission, a puzzle he couldn't leave unsolved. The partial registration number had led to dead ends for weeks. But Cooper had recently acquired specialized scanning equipment that might extract more data from the damaged chip. As the new scanner processed the information, Cooper sipped cold coffee and reviewed his notes on Shadow's case. The physical evidence was compelling burn patterns consistent with a vehicle fire, healed fractures that matched the timeline of the Thompson accident, and the dog's unmistakable recognition of Lily. But scientific confirmation would strengthen their case against Victor Reeves, who continued to assert ownership despite the restraining order Mitchell had secured. The scanner beeped, indicating the process was complete. Cooper leaned forward, his exhaustion forgotten as he scrolled through the recovered data. What he saw made him reach immediately for his phone. "Sarah, it's James. I've got it confirmation beyond any doubt. The chip contains the full registration information. Shadow was registered as Max to the Thompson family 2 years before the accident." His voice quickened with excitement. "But there's more. The registration includes his training certification. He wasn't just a family pet, he was a certified rescue dog. Thomas Thompson was a volunteer firefighter, and Max was trained for search and rescue operations." The revelation cast Shadow's actions in a new light. His attempt to rescue the family from the burning car hadn't been merely instinct, it had been training. The very skills that had made him special had also exposed him to the trauma that left him scarred. "There's one more thing," Cooper continued. "The chip contains contact information for an emergency secondary owner, Thomas Thompson's sister in Michigan. According to this, she would have been next of kin for the dog if something happened to the family." Mitchell absorbed this information in thoughtful silence. "She might not even know he survived," she said finally. "I need that contact information. And James, thank you." The morning brought another development. Dr. Patel called Mitchell as she was preparing to take Shadow for his now regular hospital visit. "We've identified the source of Lily's resistant infection," Patel explained. "And we've adjusted her antibiotics accordingly. Her condition has stabilized overnight." "That's wonderful news," Mitchell replied, relief evident in her voice. "There's something else," Patel continued, her tone shifting. "During rounds this morning, Lily was lucid enough to share some memories about the accident. She mentioned something about Officer Mitchell being there that night." Mitchell's grip tightened on the phone. "What exactly did she say? That you helped pull her away from the car? That you were crying?" Patel paused. "Sarah, were you the responding officer to the Thompson accident?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Mitchell closed her eyes, the memory she had fought to compartmentalize for 6 months surging forward. "No," she said finally. "I wasn't the responding officer. I was the other driver." The silence that followed was profound. "It was raining," Mitchell continued, the words coming with difficulty. Highway 41 was slick. A truck ahead of me jackknifed, and I swerved to avoid it. My car clipped the Thompsons' vehicle, sending it through the guardrail. Her voice faltered. The investigation cleared me of wrongdoing, classified it as an unavoidable accident. But that doesn't change the fact that my actions contributed to their deaths. Does Lily know? Patel asked quietly. No. She was unconscious when I reached her. By the time emergency services arrived, I was just another first responder at the scene. Mitchell took a deep breath. I've been carrying this since that night. My transfer to the Riverdale district, my special attention to Pinewood, it was all because of Lily. You need to tell her, Patel said gently. Children have ways of piecing things together, especially when trauma is involved. Better she hears it from you than constructs her own version. Mitchell knew she was right, but the prospect filled her with dread. She had built her relationship with Lily on an omission that now felt like an outright lie. When she arrived at the hospital with Shadow, Mitchell found Kyle already there, sitting awkwardly in the waiting room. His first night at Pinewood had been rough, filled with nightmares and anxiety about his father, but he had insisted on coming to check on Lily. They said she's doing better, he told Mitchell, his expression brightening as he spotted Shadow. Can I come with you to see her? Mitchell hesitated, weighing the complexities of the situation. Let me talk to her first, she decided. There are some things I need to explain. Shadow sensed her tension, pressing close to her side as they walked toward Lily's room. The girl was sitting up in bed today. Her color improved, though she still required supplemental oxygen. Her face lit up when she saw Shadow, then shifted to confusion when she noticed Mitchell's serious expression. What's wrong? Lily asked, her voice stronger than it had been in days. Is Shadow okay? He's fine, Mitchell assured her, allowing the dog to approach the bed where Lily immediately buried her fingers in his fur. But there's something important I need to tell you. Something about the night of your parents' accident. As gently as possible, Mitchell explained her role in the crash that had claimed Thomas and Eleanor Thompson's lives. She expected anger, accusations, perhaps even hatred from the child whose world she had unwittingly shattered. Instead, Lily listened with a stillness that belied her years, her hand never ceasing its gentle stroking of Shadow's head. When Mitchell finished, the room fell quiet save for the soft beeping of monitors. I remember you, Lily said finally. Not from that night. I don't remember much about the crash. But after, in the hospital, you came to see me, but you didn't say who you were. Mitchell nodded, throat tight. I came every day until your aunt arrived from California to take you to her home. The arrangement that had ultimately fallen through when the aunt's own health issues made caring for a traumatized child impossible. I knew you looked familiar when you started coming to Pinewood, Lily continued, but I couldn't remember why. She studied Mitchell's face. Were you looking for Shadow too? The question held no accusation, only a child's attempt to make sense of connections. Mitchell shook her head. No, I didn't know he had survived. I was looking for a way to help you, to make amends, somehow, for my part in what happened. Lily considered this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. Mom always said that accidents happen even to good people, she said finally. She wouldn't want you to be sad forever. The simple absolution, offered with a child's straightforward grace. broke something open in Mitchell's chest. Shadow, sensing the emotional shift, moved to press against her leg, offering the same comfort he provided to Lily. "There's someone else who wants to see you," Mitchell said when she had composed herself. "Kyle is here. He's been worried about you." Surprise flickered across Lily's face. "Kyle. But he hates me." Mitchell shook her head. "No, he doesn't. Sometimes people who are hurting end up hurting others. Kyle has been going through some difficult things at home," as if understanding the conversation. Shadow gave a soft woof. Lily looked at the dog, then back at Mitchell. "Okay," she decided. "He can come in." The reunion between former bully and victim was awkward at first, with Kyle hovering uncertainly in the doorway, but when Shadow approached him without hostility, the tension eased. "I'm sorry," Kyle blurted, the words clearly rehearsed but sincere. "For everything. For pushing you and tearing your picture and being mean." Lily studied him for a long moment. "Shadow likes you now," she observed. "So you must be different." It was, perhaps, the highest endorsement possible in her world. 3 months later, Riverside Park basked in the golden light of early summer. The once neglected playground had undergone a transformation. Fresh paint brightened the swing sets. New mulch cushioned the play areas, and volunteers had cleared the overgrown sections that had served as Shadow's hiding places during his months as a stray. At the center of this renewal stood Lily Thompson, her honey-blonde hair now catching the sunlight as she tossed a tennis ball for Shadow. The German shepherd bounded after it with enthusiasm that belied his permanent limp, his coat gleaming with health, the scars still visible, but no longer defining him. "Don't throw it too far," called Sarah Mitchell from her position at a nearby picnic table where she was arranging cupcakes on a platter. "Remember what Dr. Cooper said about not overtaxing his leg?" Lily nodded, adjusting her next throw to a more modest distance. Shadow retrieved the ball and returned it to her feet, his amber eyes bright with joy at this simple pleasure they shared. The gathering in the park marked several milestones: Lily's full recovery from pneumonia, the official approval of Mitchell's foster parent application, and the community fundraiser that had saved Pinewood Children's Home from budget cuts. Streamers decorated the pavilion, and a hand-painted banner proclaimed "New Beginnings" in rainbow letters. Mrs. Winters moved among the tables with the assistance of a cane, her silver hair swept up in a festive style for the occasion. At 86, she had finally agreed to retire as Pinewood's director, though she remained involved as a consultant to the new administration. "Who would have thought?" she remarked to Mitchell, watching Lily laugh as Shadow performed a playful bow. "That one stray dog would lead to all this?" Mitchell smiled, her gaze taking in not just Lily and Shadow, but the broader scene: Kyle helping younger children on the monkey bars, his father noticeably absent, but his caseworker present, Dr. Cooper demonstrating basic dog training techniques to interested families, Officer Ramirez, who had taken over Mitchell's patrol route, chatting with community members about the new Neighborhood Watch program. "It wasn't just the dog," Mitchell replied. "It was what he showed us about connection, about how healing happens when we find our people." The journey to this moment had not been smooth. There had been legal hurdles in establishing Mitchell as Lily's foster parent, given her connection to the accident. Victor Reeves had made a final attempt to claim Shadow. necessitating a court hearing where Dr. Cooper's microchip evidence and Mitchell's testimony had finally secured the dog's legal status as Lily's companion animal. The Thompson family's sister in Michigan had been located and, after an emotional phone conversation with Mitchell, had supported the arrangement. Grateful that her brother's beloved dog had somehow found his way back to Lily. Even Shadow's position at Pinewood had required advocacy. Dr. Cooper had established a formal therapy dog program, with Shadow as its pioneering member, creating a framework that satisfied even the most stringent licensing requirements. The success of the program had attracted attention and funding, allowing for facility improvements that benefited all the children. "Sarah," Lily called, waving Mitchell over. "Shadow wants to show you his new trick." Mitchell joined them on the grass, kneeling to be at eye level with both child and dog. "What's he learned now?" Lily's face shone with pride as she gave Shadow a hand signal they had practiced. The German shepherd immediately lay down, rolled onto his side, and placed one paw over his eyes as if playing peekaboo. The simple trick, taught with patience during Lily's recovery, delighted the small crowd that had gathered to watch. "That's wonderful," Mitchell praised, scratching Shadow behind the ears in the spot he favored. "You're both quick learners." Kyle approached cautiously, still finding his place in this reconfigured social order. His 2 months at Pinewood had brought changes. He stood straighter, smiled more easily, though shadows of his past experiences lingered in quiet moments. "Can I try?" he asked, indicating the tennis ball in Lily's hand. Without hesitation, Lily passed it to him. "Just not too far," she instructed, echoing Mitchell's earlier caution. "His back leg gets tired." The exchange, simple as it was, represented healing that many had thought impossible. The former bully and his victim now navigated a tentative friendship, bound by their shared connection to Shadow and the understanding that came from recognizing pain in others. As the afternoon progressed, Mitchell found a quiet moment to sit with Lily on a bench overlooking the playground. Shadow lay at their feet, content after an afternoon of play and attention. "I have something for you," Mitchell said, removing a flat package from her bag. "Dr. Cooper helped me with it." Lily unwrapped the gift carefully, revealing a framed photograph, her torn family picture, now expertly restored and whole again. She traced the smiling faces of her parents with gentle fingers. "Thank you," she whispered, leaning against Mitchell's side. "There's one more thing," Mitchell continued, producing a smaller package. This one contained a new photograph and a matching frame. Lily, Mitchell, and Shadow sitting on the steps of their new home, the modest house Mitchell had purchased closer to Pinewood. "Our new family," Lily said, looking between the two frames. "And our old one, too." "Both are important," Mitchell agreed. "The people we've lost help shape us, just as much as those we find along the way." Shadow stirred at their feet, rising to press his muzzle against Lily's knee as if sensing the emotional moment. His intuition for human feelings had only deepened with his recovery, making him not just a pet, but a true emotional support animal. Across the park, Mrs. Winters called everyone to gather for cake and ice cream. As they walked toward the pavilion, Lily between Mitchell and Shadow, a comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that exists only between people who have weathered storms together. The official adoption hearing was still weeks away, the path forward not without its challenges. Mitchell's modest home would need adjustments to meet foster care requirements. Lily would continue therapy to address her trauma. Shadow would require ongoing medical care for his old injuries. But watching Lily smile as she helped serve cake to the younger children, Shadow vigilant at her side. Mitchell felt a certainty that had eluded her since the night of the accident. Some broken things couldn't be repaired, the lives lost on Highway 41, the months Lily had spent withdrawn and silent, the innocence stolen from Kyle by his father's cruelty. But new things could be built from the fragments a family forged through shared pain and healing. A community awakened to its responsibility toward its most vulnerable members. A future shaped by compassion rather than fear. As the summer evening deepened into twilight, Shadow led Lily and Mitchell along the park path toward home. No longer a stray, no longer unwanted. He moved with the confidence of an animal who had found his purpose guiding two humans who had saved him just as surely as he had saved them. At the edge of the park, Lily paused to look back at the gathering still in progress. "Do you think other kids like me will find dogs like Shadow?" she asked. Mitchell considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think whenever someone feels alone or afraid, there's always hope that they'll find exactly who they need, whether that's a person, an animal, or both." Lily nodded, satisfied with this answer. She took Mitchell's hand in her right and rested her left on Shadow's head, completing the circle that had begun with a chance encounter at Foster Street. Together, they walked toward home, three once broken souls who had created something whole and beautiful from the fragments of their past. Behind them, the setting sun cast their shadows, one tall, one small, one four-legged stretching forward on the path ahead, united and inseparable in the growing dusk, in a world that often feels fractured by time and circumstance. Lily and Shadow's journey reminds us that healing comes in unexpected forms. As we age, we carry our own invisible scars, children grown distant, partners lost, dreams deferred. We understand what it means to rebuild from broken pieces. This story speaks to the resilience we've cultivated through decades of weathering life's storms. Like Shadow, many of us bear the marks of past hardships. Like Lily, we've known the silence of grief too profound for words. Yet the most powerful medicine often comes through connection, a hand reaching out when we've fallen, a presence that stays when others have gone.